Chapter 19. Lucidity as an Inevitable Horizon. This chapter does not exist to add a new thesis. It exists to close correctly what has already been said, without noise, without ambiguity, and without the anxiety of convincing. Throughout this book, it has become clear that the great confusion around free will does not arise from a sophisticated technical error. It arises from something simpler and deeply human. The discomfort we feel when we realize we do not control what we would like to control. When a human being is deprived of the idea of absolute control, an almost automatic reaction usually appears, a sense of devaluation, resistance, defense. This reaction is not rational, it is emotional. In many cases, it is a silent manifestation of the ego, trying to preserve an inflated image of autonomy. The confusion around free will functions, then, as an unconscious protection mechanism. Not because someone wants to deceive themselves, but because accepting limits injures very old and deeply rooted expectations. This reading, however, loses strength when we look at the whole. The beauty of reality is not in absolute individual authorship, but in the coherence of the whole. It is precisely the absence of total control that allows justice to operate at a deeper level than the one we normally conceive. Justice, here, is not moralized punishment. It is consequence. It is response. It is learning. It is karma, in the functional sense, what returns not to condemn, but to adjust. This point requires additional care. When we understand that we do not have absolute control, we also understand that others do not. At that moment, judgments and criticisms begin to lose the meaning they once seemed to have. They reveal themselves to be as inevitable as the actions they intended to judge. It is possible that the reader, upon arriving here, feels a new discomfort, a kind of retroactive responsibility for judgments, criticisms, and condemnations made in the past. This discomfort must be interrupted with clarity. Before this understanding, it could not have been different. The judgments made, the criticisms launched, the condemnations sustained were direct expressions of the level of consciousness available at that moment. There was no other possible way to act. To demand lucidity before lucidity exists is to commit the very error this entire book dismantles. More than that, this phase was not only inevitable, it was necessary. Learning requires contrast. Harvest requires action. Karma, understood as educational return, can only operate while consciousness still does not see with total clarity. If everyone were fully enlightened from the beginning, there would be no experience, no consequence, no transformation. This limitation is not a defect of the process. It is part of the process. That is why both action and judgment, both error and condemnation, both ignorance and discovery belong to the same mechanism. Nothing happens outside it. This does not turn judgment into virtue, nor error into correctness. But it dissolves the illusion that someone, including ourselves, could have acted beyond the reach of what they were in that instant. Therefore, one statement must remain firm, even if it is uncomfortable. From the worst human being to the best of them, everyone always acts at the limit of what they are in that moment. No one offers more than they have. No one surpasses their own structure. When this understanding settles, something reorganizes. Anger loses force, not because the harm disappears, but because the impossible expectation has been abandoned. Absolute guilt gives way to functional responsibility. Morality stops being theatrical and becomes educational. If this reading did not hold logically, this book should not exist. But when we observe reality attentively, we do not find a more coherent alternative. Every attempt to preserve an absolute freedom demands artificial exceptions, improvised mysteries, or insoluble contradictions. Here, none of that was necessary. The discomfort was crossed. The illusion of control was dismantled. And what remained was not emptiness, but structure. Not indifference, but lucid empathy. Not nihilism, but meaning. With that, the path ends. The lucidity that emerges from this crossing does not lead to passivity. It releases energy. It frees us from paralyzing guilt so we can invest attention in what can truly be influenced, present conditions. Think of the smoker who tries to quit. He does not fail out of moral weakness, but because his will to smoke is inevitable in that moment, woven by habits, stress, and bodily chemistry. Lucidity does not punish him. It guides him. Instead of condemning himself, he observes the desire, alters contexts, seeks support, modifies causes. Change does not arise from a mythical force of the will, but from patient work on conditions. Thus, inevitability does not condemn us. It invites us to possible responsibility. In the end, the inevitability of everything is not a prison. It is a liberation. It frees us from the illusion of absolute control, from guilt that perpetuates itself, from poorly justified anger. In its place, a sober compassion emerges, for ourselves, for others, for the living world. Like a river that flows inevitably to the sea, existence gains meaning not despite causes, but through them. The discomfort we feel when questioning freedom is itself inevitable and necessary. It points to lucidity as a horizon. May this lucidity accompany the reader not as a final answer, but as a more just, lighter, and more honest way of being in the world.